Joining me today on Good News with Twanda Black, where we're discovering some of the most inspiring trials to triumph stories and empowerment moments. Call up a friend and let them know it's time for some good news. And welcome to Good News with Twanda Black. I'm your host. We talk with folks from all walks of life about their good news, because if your neighbor and your family and your friends are having good news, it's good news for you too. So sit back, relax, and enjoy our next guest. Joining us today is Deborah Hoard. She is producer-director of Move When the Spirit Says Move, the legacy of Dorothy Florence Cotton. And it's a really interesting piece. How are you today, Deborah?
Very well, thank you. Nice.
Well, first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself. You are president of Photosynthesis Productions, and for a long time, actually. So talk about your career.
Yes, well, it's one of those things that was sort of by accident. Often these things, a friend asked me to help him film a kid's birthday scene for National Geographic Society. And I had some really cute kids, and so I did it and started helping out on productions. And that was 35 years ago, and now I own the company.
Wow.
It's learned from the bottom all the way up.
So what were you doing before then? Did you desire to do something else, or just kind of fell in your lap?
Went to school at Berkeley during the 60s, so I was busy with political things. And then I have a Cornell degree, and I was home and thinking about the next thing I would do. And in my 30s, we have time for lots of different things these days. So I was excited. So I was ready for a career, and this really clicked.
That's pretty awesome. Of course, this is we're celebrating and honoring women this month, and you as a producer and a filmmaker has created this documentary, The Legacy of Dorothy Cotton. First of all, tell us about this really remarkable woman. I've heard about her even in settings with some of the civil rights leaders here in Atlanta.
Yes.
And they have mentioned her name.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. She needs more recognition. It was unfortunately somewhat typical of the times that, and we explore this in the film, is that women were undervalued, unrecognized, and at that time and in our history. It was the men who were out in front giving the speeches, and that's not to say they shouldn't have been also, because a lot of the worst violence in that time was directed to Black men. And so it was important to raise their stature as well. But the women, this is happening today, are not recognized enough. And Dorothy lived the last 25 years or so of her life in the little town Ithaca, New York, where I live, upstate New York. Came here to work at Cornell University. And even people here, even though she was a charismatic, fabulous person in our midst, a lot of people did not realize her importance in the civil rights movement as a colleague and an advisor to Dr. King. So our film was produced together with the Dorothy Cotton Institute, which she co-founded with other colleagues here in Ithaca to carry on her legacy. And that's, I believe, what we have done or have attempted to do, is to show what she did and then inspire others to realize the power we have within us. That was very much her message, was don't wait for somebody else to save you.
Save yourself. Save yourself. So talk about, how did she get involved in the civil rights movement?
She grew up with a strong sense of fairness and the injustice she experienced as a child changed her life forever. And she talks about it in our film. We're very pleased that we're able to let her tell her story in the movie because there's so much footage of her giving speeches and being interviewed that has been unused. But she devoted her life when I guess it was maybe it was the late 50s, 1960. The pastor at her church invited another little pastor he'd heard of called Martin Luther King to come to her church to speak. They were trying to influence the local lunch counter to be able to serve Black people. And one thing led to another, and she became a key member of Dr. King's executive committee at the Southern Christian Leadership Conference over the next many years until his death. So it just, it was perfect for her. She was head of the Citizenship Education Program, which trained thousands of people across the South on the power that citizenship brought them, and not just to vote. She felt very much, but to actually participate in democracy, and that it was fine. One of her famous stories is people would complain about they were not being well served by the city clerk because they were Black. And she said, well, why aren't you the city clerk?
Okay.
That's one of her famous comebacks to try to get people to, but you have to, people have to transform themselves in some ways to feel that power.
That's right. And it's happening today.
Yes, it's so, which is why we're so thrilled that this film is at a good time. I mean, it would always be a good time, but this time especially because young people in particular are getting inspired and making a difference. And Tasha Brown, who are embody Dorothy's legacy today. It's so wonderful to hear and hope that they will, bring power to people. Sort of back in the day, like I said, I went to Berkeley in the 60s, so.
So you were smack in the middle of everything.
It was a very exciting time. And I remember as a young person, I was 18, 20, we felt like we changed the world. We felt like we stopped the war. And so I can see as a young person now how they can feel like, we're going to do something too. Because there's a lot to be done. Absolutely. So empowering. Talk about the Dorothy Cotton Institute and what it does there. Yes, and it was founded in 2007, a number of, 11 years before Dorothy passed away. And with colleagues who realized the value of her message of empowerment and nonviolence. And they wanted to have a formal, I think they first started saying, well, we should have a scholarship at Cornell, or we should kind of do something. And it became apparent to all of them that they needed a whole institute. They needed something that would have programming and outreach and connect with national leaders all over the country and the world internationally. One thing that we show in the film is a listening tour that the Institute conducted in 2012 to Palestine, to the West Bank. These elder Black statesmen from the civil rights movement in America went to Palestine to see if there were things they could learn about how they were trying nonviolence, or seeing if there were things they could share about their experience. Because in many ways, people around the world believe that the civil rights movement, changed the country. And, how did they do that in a nonviolent way? So, and she was in her 80s, I believe, at the time. And so it was still, it was an amazing vision that she had of this international curiosity and movement for peace and social justice.
That's phenomenal. How can folks see? I know that you're in the midst of a film festival tour at this point, but how can the regular population see the film?
Well, if you happen to be in a couple of places where we're having festivals, that's one avenue. The rollout of the film, our rollout plan is to have these festivals to attract a distributor who would be able to stream it. And so the deal is yet to be made. We're hopeful. And then it will be, by the fall, we certainly hope that it will be streaming on a platform that's available to most folks. But also another thing we're doing that we plan in the fall is is a lot of a sort of tour of universities and church groups and community organizations that want to show the film and have it be a moment to bring together people to discuss how to make change and, or registering to vote. The film could be useful all the way through next year as we lead up to the next presidential election.
Absolutely.
That's our very strong hope that this gets used that way, and that we can have, and the Dorothy Cotton Institute and we can be available for panels. And if it's going to be, we'll go around the South and around the country to learn from people and to help them use the film to build a better future.
How did the whole movement, and I mean even interacting with the remarkable Dorothy Cotton, really change your life and the life of those around you?
I quote Dorothy all the time in my mind sometimes when I think, oh, what would Dorothy do? And what are her standards? So I was, when I first met her, I was asking to interview her about her trip to Palestine. And she said, oh, well, maybe. And she said, she called me back and she called around to some of her colleagues and she said, everybody said not to do it, but I think I'm going to do it. So come pick me up. And so that was the beginning. And so you get the idea. And she was just captivating and was on so many ways around our community. So it's really an honor for me to be connected and to be able to do this film about her and to bring her name along with a lot of other names people hear about. Dorothy should be in that list too. Yes.
So I'm going to switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about you as a female filmmaker in this environment. I know it's changed a lot, but talk about your journey a little bit.
Well, I'm old enough that it wasn't, at the start, I was just sort of a girl.
Like all the rest of us.
And a lot of other girls were secretaries.
Right.
So it's been a journey, as Dorothy talks about in the film, is learning, dealing with men that she thought she was smarter than some of them anyway. But she just let them think what they needed to think. And sort of claimed her space. She was confident, and that has helped me over the last, I interviewed her in 2018. That was the first time. So it's been a number of years that she has been influencing me in that way. But before that, I think it helped me a lot that I worked at Photosynthesis. I became a key member for almost 20 years before a very terrible, my colleague passed away very suddenly at age 55. And I bought the business, and that was 20 years ago. And so I was really ready and had done everything you could do in the business because I started filing and things like that. And so it was very, I was ready at the time, and I was enough older that I wasn't just a little girl anymore. I may have been, I was could expect to be treated with a little more respect and dignity. So, and I don't know, of course, we live in Ithaca is a very tolerant, diverse, open-minded place, and which is why I love it here. But, the sexism is still somewhat structural, but more subtle here.
Everywhere. Yeah.
So, but I just think if you expect to be treated with respect. It helps that people feel that, maybe, I don't know.
Well, I mean, your personality, your character, when you walk in a room, do you command the space, or yeah. So how do you choose what you're going to talk about, what you're going to make a film about, what you're going to produce?
I am so lucky at this point. I mean, I have a film company. I have editors and wonderful people that I love to work with. So, and my interests have always been social justice and environmental education type material things. My undergraduate degrees are in natural resources. So we are finishing up this film about Dorothy and have already started to focus on a film that almost overlaps, which is more about the youth movement for voting and for empowerment, and to maybe unpack the history a little bit. Is it different from it was in the 60s? Now, because of social media, what's really happening?
Right.
So that's something we're already beginning to look into, which is exciting. And also have been approached to collaborate on a film about food and climate change. And so food everybody eats. Most people really like to eat. And so climate change is going to change the food that is available and the food that we eat. And so that's something to explore. And again,
happening. Yeah.
It impacts some people much more than others, which is not always raised as an important point. So it's really what I want to do. Yes.
It's a good thing. That's a good thing. I read something about your film about Myanmar, and they said it was a thing of beauty. What was it about?
This was a film that a colleague, a Cornell professor, traveled in Myanmar, which used to be called Burma.
Right.
And he was told, he's a filmmaker and a novelist and teaches physics and one of those kind of people. So he was told it was illegal to videotape or film. And that was like waving a red flag at him, and he immediately started filming everything he could see. He came back to Ithaca with 100 hours of footage and walked in my front door and said, "I'm not really sure what to do with this." And my team and I took it on to tweak a story out of it, but it was fascinating because Burma had been very isolated for 50 years. Yeah. So it was sort of a much more, there were no Kentucky Fried Chickens. There was no Western influence. It was really very different. And of course, it was also very authoritarian and unjust. And Aung San Suu Kyi had been in house arrest for 20 years. So, but it was just beautifully photographed. And we worked with this colleague, Bob Lieberman, to make this movie. And it was just so unique and very fascinating to work on. That's one thing that's great about my work, is that was about Burma, and we did that. And I know a lot about Burma, and we just did a film on Mongolia as well.
Wow.
So I know a lot about Genghis Khan. Have any questions?
Where can folks go to find out more about you and Photosynthesis and learn more about your films?
Yeah, well, our website has a pretty good sort of sampling and a catalog, which is, you can get to, it's pspny.com. But if you Google Photosynthesis Productions, just Photosynthesis will get you lots of biology lessons. But if you put the productions in, we have Facebook pages and Twitter and all those things which are linked on to our website. So I hope people do. And the film Move When the Spirit Says Move has its own website and social feeds. So that's just Move When the Spirit Says Move. Oh, I see it on your screen right now.
All right. It's phenomenal and so wonderful talking with you as a female filmmaker. And just talking about civil rights, it appears that you're always going to be filming about something about justice and about rights and all of that. So God bless you on that. We look forward to seeing the film, your new film, When the Spirit Says Move, the legacy of Dorothy Foreman Cotton. Thank you so much for joining us, Deborah Hoard. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing more.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Oh, yeah, that's it. Great guest. Now, if you want to be a guest on the show, you can email me at twandablack@thepgnetwork.org or goodnews@thepgnetwork.org. You can watch the show via PGN TV on all your digital streaming apps or visit us at pgntv.org. I'll see you next time with some good news. God bless you.